The Weight of Every Choice. Chapter 1. The pianist downstairs kept missing the same note. Not badly. Most people in the hotel bar would never have noticed it. The melody continued gracefully enough each time, folding the mistake into itself. But Adrian heard it every few minutes like a small crack in glass. Evelyn sat across from him with one hand around the stem of her wineglass. "You still do that," she said. "Do what?" "Listen harder than everyone else." He almost smiled. "That sounds less irritating when you say it now." Everything sounds less irritating after 60. Outside the windows, snow drifted sideways through the amber streetlight. The storm had thickened since evening. Cars moved slowly along the avenue below, headlights muted beneath the weather. Somewhere in the lobby, a suitcase rolled across marble. Adrian looked at her carefully. 29 years. Not since he had seen her. Not exactly. He had seen photographs over the years the way people accidentally do. A university article once. A charity board announcement. One blurred image online beside a man he assumed had been her husband. Time had reached her naturally. It had reached both of them. But the essential thing remained untouched. The stillness in her face. Even at 23, Evelyn had possessed that unsettling calm that made other people confess things too quickly. "You haven't asked why I called," she said. "I assumed you'd tell me eventually. You always did mistake patience for wisdom. And you always mistook avoidance for dignity." That landed between them quietly. Neither looked away. The waiter approached then, grateful and awkward in equal measure. He asked whether they wanted another drink. Evelyn declined immediately. Adrian asked for another bourbon before remembering he had promised himself only one tonight. The waiter nodded and disappeared. "I almost didn't come," Evelyn said. "That would have been more in character." "I know." He rubbed a thumb slowly against the edge of his glass. "When I got your message," he said, "I thought someone had died." "Someone did." Adrian looked up. For a moment he saw something shift in her composure. Not collapse. Evelyn was not someone who collapsed visibly. But grief moved through her face like distant weather-crossing water. "My husband," she said. "In October." The pianist downstairs stopped abruptly mid-song. A murmur passed through the lower floor before another melody began. Adrian inhaled once through his nose. "I'm sorry." "Thank you." "What happened?" "Heart attack. Sudden enough to feel cruel. Slow enough to feel unfair." He nodded. There were probably more questions available. "Were you alone? Did he suffer? Were you happy?" But he understood, suddenly and absolutely, that none of those belonged to him. Not yet. Evelyn turned slightly toward the window. "I almost called you after the funeral," she said. "Then I realized I had no right to." "That's never stopped you before." A faint smile touched her mouth. "There he is." He regretted the remark immediately. Not because it was harsh, because it sounded intimate. The kind of rhythm two people only retain when they have once known each other too well. The waiter returned with the bourbon. Adrian thanked him without looking up. Evelyn watched the glass settle onto the table. "You still drink the expensive kind when you're unhappy." "I can afford it now." "That wasn't my question." He took a sip. The warmth spread through him slowly. "No," he said. "I suppose I'm not happy." She absorbed that without visible reaction. "And your wife?" He stared at her then. Not angrily. Simply long enough that she understood she had crossed into dangerous territory. "You looked her up before calling me," he said. "Yes. And she's beautiful." Adrian laughed once under his breath. "That's a very Evelyn answer." "It's a true one." He leaned back slightly. "Claire." Even thinking her name produced a complicated exhaustion lately. 32 years together. 2 children. A house full of carefully accumulated habits. They had built a competent life which turned out, over time, to be both an achievement and a sorrow. "She's well," he said finally. "That wasn't my question either." "No," he admitted. Snow pressed softly against the windows. At another table, a couple in their 30s argued in whispers over a phone screen. The woman kept shaking her head while the man stared down into his drink. Adrian watched them briefly with the detached tenderness reserved for strangers making ordinary mistakes. "When did you become unhappy?" Evelyn asked quietly. He considered lying. Not because she would believe him, because some reflex in him still wanted to preserve the appearance of a life properly lived. "I'm not sure," he said. "Maybe gradually. Maybe all at once 15 years ago, and I only noticed recently." She nodded as though this made perfect sense. "That sounds familiar." The piano downstairs shifted into something older now. Jazz maybe. The notes drifted upward through the hotel like smoke. Evelyn looked tired suddenly. Not physically. Something deeper. The fatigue of a person who has spent years holding herself together in the presence of others. "How long are you staying?" he asked. "Leaving Sunday." "And after that?" "Geneva. Still teaching." "Yes. What about your daughter?" "At university in Amsterdam. She changes cities the way other people change coats." He smiled despite himself. "You sound proud." "I am. And lonely." This time she smiled. "You always did hear too much." A silence followed that should have felt uncomfortable but did not. The strange thing about certain people, Adrian thought, was that time did not remove the shape they occupied inside you. It only buried it beneath years of practical living. Careers, marriages, children, illnesses, grocery lists, funerals. Then one evening they sit across from you again, and your entire inner life rearranges itself around their presence before you can stop it. He hated that this was true. Evelyn glanced toward the lobby clock. "It's late." "Yes." Neither moved. At last she reached into her bag and removed a cigarette case before remembering where she was. "You quit," Adrian said. "Mostly. You used to say people who quit smoking became unbearable." "I was younger then. I said many stupid things with confidence." "You still do." "That's true." Again that almost smile. God, he thought suddenly. It was not her beauty that unsettled him. Beauty ages into something gentler, more forgivable. It was familiarity, the unbearable ease of it. He had not spoken to this woman in nearly 3 decades. Yet every conversation with everyone else now seemed strangely over-explained by comparison. Evelyn looked down at her hands. "I should tell you why I really called." Adrian felt his chest tighten slightly. "All right." She hesitated. Not theatrically, simply searching for precision. 3 weeks before Daniel died," she said carefully. "He found your letters." The room seemed to recede around him. "What letters?" Her eyes lifted. "The ones you wrote me after Paris." Adrian stared at her. "I wrote those in 1997. "I know. You kept them?" "Yes." The bourbon no longer tasted warm. Below them, someone laughed loudly near the reception desk. A door opened, closed. Adrian spoke carefully now. "I thought you burned them." "I told you I burned them." "Why lie?" "Because I was trying to survive my marriage." The honesty of that struck harder than accusation would have. He looked at the snow again. Paris. He had spent years teaching himself not to revisit it directly. 3 weeks in October. A conference neither of them particularly needed to attend. Rain every afternoon. Her hair damp from weather. A hotel room overlooking narrow streets silvered by evening light. The first and only time they had become lovers. And afterward, the destruction. Not dramatic. No public scandal. No screaming confessions. Just the slow and permanent rearrangement of several lives. "What did your husband say?" Adrian asked. "Very little." "That doesn't sound promising." It wasn't. She folded her hands together. "I think," she said slowly, "that there are discoveries which humiliate people beyond anger." Adrian felt cold suddenly. "He read all of them?" "Yes." "And?" Evelyn looked directly at him. "He asked me whether you were the love of my life." The air between them changed. Adrian lowered his eyes to the table because there was suddenly nowhere safe to look. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I married him." "That wasn't the question." "No," she whispered. For the first time all evening, her composure fractured visibly. Only for a second, but Adrian saw it. Saw the terrible exhaustion beneath her restraint. Saw the grief tangled with guilt. Saw, with a clarity that frightened him, that this woman had spent decades living beside a silence large enough to ruin her. He should leave, he thought. A sane man would leave now. Instead, he heard himself ask, very quietly, "Was it true?" Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. The pianist downstairs found the difficult note this time. Perfectly. When she opened her eyes again, there was something almost unbearable in them. Not youth, not romance, recognition. "You already know the answer," she said. Adrian looked at her across the small table between them and understood, with sudden devastating certainty, that the worst thing about first love was not that it ended. It was that sometimes it waited patiently beneath the rest of your life. And when it returned, it arrived carrying the weight of every choice you had made without it. Evelyn reached for her coat. "I should go upstairs." He nodded, though every instinct resisted it. She stood slowly. He rose automatically beside her. For one strange suspended moment, neither moved toward goodbye. Her face was close enough now that he could see the fine lines beside her eyes, the soft evidence of decades. Winter light touched the silver threaded through her dark hair. "You look tired," she said gently. "So do you." "Yes." A small sad smile passed between them. Then she touched his arm. Only briefly, but the contact moved through him with terrifying force. "Good night, Adrian." He watched her walk toward the elevators without once looking back. The lobby doors opened behind him, releasing a gust of cold air into the bar. Snow spiraled briefly across the marble floor before disappearing. Adrian sat down again slowly. His untouched bourbon waited beside his hand. Upstairs somewhere in the hotel, Evelyn Hart was alone for the first time in months, maybe years. And for the first time since Paris, Adrian found himself imagining. Not remembering, but imagining. The sound of her removing her earrings in silence. The shape of her standing at the window. The loneliness waiting in the room once the door closed behind her. He finished the bourbon in one swallow. Then his phone vibrated. A message from Claire. "Are you still at the conference dinner?" Adrian stared at the screen while snow continued falling beyond the windows. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. "Yes," he typed, then stopped. The cursor blinked beneath the lie. And upstairs, somewhere above him, the woman he had once nearly destroyed his life for was still awake.